Hi there, welcome to part 2 of the Alternative Parenting Workshop. I am John Ming Shiv from Cabrini Green Legal Aid, and I'm here with my colleague Sandy, and we're going to present a Know Your Rights presentation for parents about the Department of Children and Family Services. So we're going to go through a lot of information here, try to take it piece by piece. First, Sandy and I will introduce ourselves and our background, and then explain what DCFS is and what their mission is. And then I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into rights about parental responsibility, and then dive right into DCFS investigations and what happens when parents are being investigated by the Department of Children and Family Services. I will touch briefly on foster care, although that won't be a focus of today's presentation. And then finally, we'll end on changes due to the coronavirus and share some resources for parents and explain a little bit about what has changed with the court system since coronavirus became a major health issue. And we'll end with a few questions from the team. All right, so I'll have Sandy introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I think I introduced myself a little bit earlier, but I am a social worker by profession and also a restorative justice practitioner. And my role at Cabrini Green, I kind of use a lot of those skills in my current part-time position of coordinating the reunification ride to Logan Correctional Facility in Lincoln, Illinois. So greetings, everybody. And I also retired from DCFS, where I worked with the training division for about 11 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, same for me. I already introduced myself, but I am a family law attorney who takes cases where I represent parents when they're being investigated by DCFS or have been found indicated or guilty of abuse and neglect by DCFS, and I help parents appeal. And I also do cases in juvenile court when parents' children are in foster care. So that's the perspective I'm coming in, more from like a parent's rights perspective. All right, and I'll have Sandy talk about the DCFS and their mission.
I wanted to say, as we think about Department of Children and Family Services, I think it's important for us to look at their, how big this organization is in terms of they have a big presence in our community. And it's really, and I think the key for me is because it's about our children. And so the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, they are by law, they're over 50 years old by law, they have been delegated as the agency that protects our children in terms of children under 18 years of age. And so their main focus is looking at children that have been abused, neglected, or are dependents. And in our earlier presentation with Alternatives, Inc., they were talking about children that may be in crisis because of lockout. So a child that's in a lockout status may be, their parents are not letting them back in. They may be deemed as a dependent, in terms of not having anywhere to go. So Janine is going to talk a little bit more about what child abuse and neglect looks like. But I just wanted to say that the department's focus is protecting children who have been deemed abused, neglected, or dependent. And so again, since 1965, the department has been given federal and state responsibility and authority to care for our children. What's really interesting, guys, before 1965, in our country, in our state, we had more facilities to protect animals than we did to protect our children. So I'm happy to know that now we have certainly we care about our animals and our pets, but we also have a whole entire system in place to make sure that our children are safe. And so I'd like to get to the how. How does the department do that? They do that by working with families, community partners, licensed child care facilities. They work with foster homes. They work with organizations like Alternatives, Inc., etc. I wanted to ask Janine, can you move to the slide that shows the department's mission for a minute to just kind of help us expand on that? If we look at this this mission statement, it really gives an overview. So sometimes people look at DCFS as the enemy, but if we really understand and know that our children are our most precious resource, you know that, and you think about that, their mission is to promote prevention. And the way they promote prevention is providing educational opportunities in our communities through funding, again, of organizations like Alternatives, Inc., Child and Family Serve. Davin talked about some of the agencies that they work with, like Lawrence Hall's children's programs. They are licensed child welfare agencies, child care programs, etc. And so that's how they promote prevention. They promote child safety by developing a set of rules and regulations that speak to what is deemed abuse and neglect. They also do that by the licensing standards that they have. They also do that by having a system in place where people can call the hotline. That means anybody can call the hotline. And Janine will go over that a little bit more in her presentation. But that's how they promote child safety. And again, as we continue to educate our parents, our families through programs like this one, that all that speaks to how we look at ways to keep our children safe. When you look at this mission statement for the Department of Children and Family Services, all those things are aligned, are related to each other in terms of how we promote prevention, or how the department promotes prevention, child safety, permanency, and well-being. And well-being speaks to when we look at where our children developmentally, where our children in terms of social and emotional development, where are they physically, are all of their needs being met? The programs for Alternative Inc. talked about really responding to children in those different areas, you know, child behavior issues, crisis issues, and all those speak to how children are developing in relation to social, emotional, etc. So the department talks about how they bring the voices of Illinois children and families to the forefront, building trusting relationships, again, working in partnership with other community organizations. The department absolutely cannot do this by themselves. And building those relationships that empower the people that they serve. So I just think this is important because so many of the families that are connected to Alternatives Inc. may have had some experience with the department. And so I'm pleased to be a part of this presentation with my colleague, where we're able to provide some information to help families get a better understanding of what the department does. So let's flip back for a minute to the how screen. Thank you. So again, we talked about the department carries out their mandate of serving children and families by creating a set of standards to follow. The laws, in terms of the laws and the federal mandates that they have been given responsibility and authority to do. So again, they're over 50 years old, and it's interesting, and it's so important for everybody to understand the total impact that the department has. Thank you. Let's see where we need to go. Can we move the slide? The Department of Children and Family Services has a website. They have a website, and on the screen, you can see just some of the information that's available on their website. So we talked about that they have a mandate in terms of prevention, protection, or education, and as well as child safety. And so the next couple of slides just give you a little overview of what their services are. And so I want to invite families to just take a minute to really check out what is it that the Department of Children and Family Services provides. I think as a parent and a grandparent now, it was important to me, even when I was working at Department of Children and Family Services. You know, I've had experience being an investigator and a follow-up worker, as well as working in training. But as a parent, it was really a comfort for me to know that if somebody at the school or at the after school program where I was sending my son, that if anybody harmed my child or was neglectful towards my child in the arena of the services that they were supposed to provide, that they could be held accountable for that abusive or neglectful behavior. And so again, Janine will talk more about who can call the department, who can make a report of abuse or neglect that's concerned, and also who can be investigated. So again, I hope that parents can learn to see it from the other side as well, is that there's an opportunity for your child to be protected from harm from others as well. Okay, can you advance, please? So we talked about prevention, in terms of, so this is just some additional information that's available on the Department of Children and Family Services website. And so I want to invite you guys again to take a look, just kind of scroll through their website, and you'll see a vast of information that's available there for you. There's opportunities for trainings that they offer to the community if you're interested. And if we can advance, I think one more time, that you'll see starting at the bottom of this part of the website, there's a bunch of links to the bottom that shows the different opportunities that you can take advantage of. It gives you a good information, and also all of their resources are provided in not only in English, but in Spanish as well. So again, I want to invite you to just kind of scroll through the website. There may be some parents that's interested in just getting information about different areas of your parenting. So in addition to Alternatives Inc., you can get some information from the DCFS website. There's a link right here. I'm looking at about how to keep your family strong. How do you bond with your baby? These are just tips that can help any parent. Certainly new parents, even if you've had a baby 4 or 5 years old, that second baby may not be like that first baby, or even a third or fourth baby. So there's good information here. And also there may be some parents interested in becoming licensing and becoming a foster parent to help with children that need that extra support when they're having problems with their own family. It's not working out. So I would invite each one of you all, and if we can advance one more time. So you'll see there's additional resources and additional links on the DCFS website. Okay, we got a little teeny tiny glitch here. It was just the end of that PowerPoint that had additional websites.
Oh, yes.
We had additional links, I'm sorry.
I think we'll get to it at the end, Sandy, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. But I just wanted to, again, to invite everybody to take an opportunity to go to the Department of Children and Family Services website and just take a stroll through there and take advantage of the vast amount of information that can be available to help support you in your role as a parent, and any other questions that you may have. Thank you, Janine.
Oh, no, thank you, Sandy. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because part of what Sandy mentioned is DCFS has a mandate from the state to protect children. And in order to carry out that mandate, they do have the power to investigate families that they believe or that they have some evidence of abuse and neglect. And so I did want to talk about how parents get involved in these investigations. And I will be mostly focusing on when a parent is being accused during an investigation, although I definitely acknowledge that there are many cases in which a parent may actually want to call DCFS and have them investigate another person in order to ask them to help protect their children. So before I dive right into the parental rights portion, I wanted to talk about parental responsibilities because whenever I teach these courses, I say that they go hand in hand. When someone has a right, they also have a responsibility to protect that right. So I basically put side by side parental rights and parental responsibilities so that we can see how they tie into each other. So all parents, including mothers and fathers, have equal rights under Illinois law. So neither a mother or a father or any other parent has more rights than the other one to their children starting out with. Now, a court can change that later, but the starting point in the law is equal rights. And these rights include the right to care for and see their child, a right to discipline the child, and a right to make decisions about their child's religion, education, and health. Now, all rights have limits, so when a parent exercises their right and it comes to a detriment to their child's well-being, that's usually when the state steps in. And I just wanted to put a little pinpoint here that I won't have time to fully address, but I wanted to say that if a father is not listed on a child's birth certificate, they have to take steps to become the child's legal father before a court will enforce his rights. So that may involve asking the court for a DNA test or having the mother of the child sign what's called a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, saying that both parents agree that that father is the child's father. So I say that both parents have equal rights, but before a father can take advantage of it, he has to be deemed the baby's legal father. All right, so what are the responsibilities that a parent has? A parent has to provide their child with support, education, medical care, food, clothing, and shelter. And I know that Sandy and I have talked to Davin a little bit about this, about since alternatives deals with lockouts. A parent is obligated to provide their kids with shelter and these support systems, even if they're having a conflict with their child. So even if their child is acting up, a parent still has a responsibility to care for them. And if they need help in providing these responsibilities, a parent can always voluntarily seek assistance from DCFS. And I know there's a lot of mistrust of DCFS, but at the end of the day, their ultimate goal is to support children. And I have spoken with parents who have reached out to DCFS to get support for their children and then provided that without any sort of like punishment or monitoring associated with it. So along with these responsibilities to provide care for their children, parents also have a heightened responsibility to protect their children. And that includes from physical abuse, but also sexual abuse and any dangerous environment. So when a parent doesn't do that, DCFS may investigate them for something called neglect, which I'll address a bit later. All right, and I definitely want to invite any comments or questions as I go along with this, because I know we're covering a lot of material. I get a lot of questions about discipline and what the proper level of discipline is for children, especially involving physical punishment. It's definitely a case-by-case basis for every family, but in general, the state does not prefer physical punishment of children, and spanking is not illegal, but they really like to see that as a last case resort when all other efforts that don't involve physical punishment fail. So if a parent has tried to send the child to their room or take away their cell phone or have them write an essay and none of those efforts are working to discipline their children, then a parent is entitled to use some level of corporal punishment, and that is allowed under the law. But it is definitely a tricky issue. And with recent cases like with AJ Freund, the state and DCFS have gotten really on high alert about cases where parents are using corporal punishment. So I would definitely, caution parents and really use physical punishment as a last resort. Okay. All right, so I did want to talk about DCFS investigations, which are quite a murky process, and there are a lot of policies and procedures that guide what DCFS has to do when they receive a report of abuse and neglect. But because they're so long, really only attorneys take the time to read through and review it. So I'm going to try to share at least a small tidbit of what I consider the most important parts of the policies and procedures that I think parents should know if they're ever being investigated. Okay. How does an investigation begin? Investigations that are led by DCFS always begin with a hotline call. Now, the hotline call is available 24/7. There's always someone staffing it, and it can be reached at 800-25-ABUSE. And in numbers, that's 800-252-2873. Anyone can call this hotline as long as they have some sort of personal knowledge of what happened. And so, they get calls from other parents of children, get calls from neighbors, really anyone who may be concerned about the child and wants DCFS to investigate someone. There are certain people called mandated reporters. So when mandated reporters believe that there is abuse and neglect against a child, they have to call the DCFS hotline. And when I say that, it means that there are criminal penalties when mandated reporters don't call DCFS, and they may be held responsible for failing to take action. So mandated reporters include doctors, teachers, law enforcement, and a lot of social workers. So most social workers are mandated reporters, with the exception of social workers that work within a legal team. So for example, Cabrini Green Legal Aid social workers are not mandated reporters because they're protected by attorney-client confidentiality. But basically, if someone makes a call and DCFS, based on that call, has enough information to proceed on an investigation, they start an investigation. And about 73% of hotline calls are actually assigned a worker. So the majority of cases that are called in become investigations. And a DCFS investigation is not a criminal investigation. It works very differently. But there are cases when DCFS may call the police. So for example, if sexual abuse is being alleged, DCFS under their rules has to let the police know that they're investigating this. And they also may work closely if there's a criminal case in any other instance, and cooperate with police to tell them information.
Hey, Janine, can I add something here?
Yeah, of course.
You had talked earlier about how there are certain mandated reporters and that there could be criminal consequences if a mandated reporter did not report something. I just want to give an example of what that might look like. For instance, if I'm working in a school setting and a child has shared with me that they were being abused at home and I didn't report it, and so maybe a month later, they share with another teacher, another person at that school, and they say that, well, I shared that with Miss Sandy, with the social worker last month, right before Christmas or right before Easter, whatever. And so that's a way that they can find out that a child has shared some information with me as a mandated reporter, and I did not make that hotline call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, the state does take it pretty seriously, and they want to be, make sure that they're trying to protect children in that way. And I did want to define abuse and neglect for parents. I think abuse is more commonly talked about and understood. So it's this is my definition. It's not in DCFS rules, but I try to make it in a way that's understandable. But I see abuse as a parent, when a parent acts in a way that physically or sexually injures their child. And this can include if they're using corporal punishment, but to an excessive degree. So when a state, when DCFS is investigating abuse based on corporal punishment, usually it's when the parent has used something other than their hands to punish their child. So for example, they'll neglect is the other side of what DCFS investigates and is actually the majority. I don't have the exact statistic right now, but it's about 3/4 of cases that our DCFS investigates are actually neglect. And as opposed to abuse, which is when a parent acts, neglect is when a parent does not act when they're supposed to.
One of the terms they use for abuse is an act of commission, and for neglect, they call it an act of omission.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of speaks to what you have here.
Yes. And I wrote this down here because it's just what I've seen. But some of the things that are categorized as neglect are related to poverty and domestic violence. But DCFS is not supposed to actually screen families in if what they're seeing as neglect is only based on poverty. So they have explicit rules that say that they're supposed to actually help the family if what they're failing to do is because they're too poor to afford it. And so I would just take like one example. Malnutrition is one of the neglect allegations. And so if a family can't feed their child because they're poor, DCFS is supposed to still try to keep that family together and try to improve the conditions that led to the investigation, and instead of trying to tear that family apart. However, I've seen, at least in my work, that like overwhelmingly the families that DCFS investigates are of low income status. And many families who are going through domestic violence will be investigated because DCFS will get a call from a mandated reporter when they hear that abuse is going on in the home, and they have to work to act to prevent a child from getting hurt as a result of that domestic violence.
Yeah, I just think it's important that parents here understand at this point when we're talking about poverty and domestic violence, there's a whole set of funding that's specific for families where just poverty is an issue, and it's called Norman Funds. And there's a whole screening process that goes with that. So, and even with the domestic violence, if we go back to what we said, a department has to look at, and you introduce abuse and neglect. So we just want to be mindful that there's a whole set of rules and procedures that go along with that, that they can't, like you said, they can't just investigate those in isolation. They have to look at what are all the circumstances that led to that, what are the family support systems, and how does the department help to strengthen that family as opposed to tearing it down. So they do have to work with families, because you had mentioned about 73% of those calls that come into the hotline are assigned to caseworkers. So there's a lot of them that are not too. So that gives us about how many, 27%?
Mm-hmm.
So where they have to work with families, and those are called intact family cases, where children are not taken out of the home, and they have to work to really strengthen that family. How do we keep that malnutrition from becoming an issue in the future? How do we support and protect that child? So the department has an onus on them. And I want to mention too here is that the department has an oversight, the Office of Inspector General. So when there's caseworkers that's not doing their job or misrepresenting the department and all of those, they have to answer to somebody. So I think this is good to use that as an example in terms of malnutrition and domestic violence.
Yeah, Sandy mentioned intact families, and I just wanted to explain that a little bit more. Um, when it's known in the community, DCFS is known for removing children, but they actually have a mandate to try to keep families intact, and so a lot of their cases are DCFS supporting a family that they've investigated and determined to have committed abuse or neglect, but they want to keep that family together because it's better for the child to stay with their parent than have them with a foster family or taken out of the home. And so when DCFS opens an intact family case, they have to provide services to that family to make the family better, and those services are provided for free. Okay, what does an investigation look like? So the person who investigates is a DCFS investigator, and they're going to be the person who is assigned to the case throughout the entire length of the investigation. And the investigations are 60 days long with a 30-day extension if the investigator requires it for good cause. And the investigator almost always gets that 30-day extension. And only certain people can be investigated by DCFS, and the DCFS procedures says that they can investigate any caretaker of a child, and that includes parents, foster parents, teachers, and babysitters. And I've seen rare cases where siblings are investigated for actions they have done against another child. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this, Sandy, that caretaker includes legal and illegal caretakers. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, you know what? In many communities, we have family arrangements, if you will. You know, where somebody leaves the kids with a friend. You know, with the cousin. I'm gonna go out of town just for the weekend, and that person may not come back to retrieve their children. And so we have some just situations where they're not always legal. So certainly leaving them with a non-custodial parent, if the mom is the custodial parent and the dad is not, leaving them with dad is okay. He's the legal, he's legal, in terms of a relationship. But leaving your child with the neighbor, with the boyfriend, with the whoever, and not coming back. And so if those people, those illegal or informal, if you will, relationships end up being somebody that has committed harm or abuse or neglect to that child, they can be investigated as well.
Mm-hmm. Generally, during an investigation, we recommend that parents fully cooperate with the DCFS investigator and allow them to interview the children when asked. The only thing that we caution is that the parent doesn't have to allow the DCFS investigator into their home. And so if a parent is at all concerned about the conditions of their home, then they have a right to privacy and don't have to talk to the investigator within the home. And then another exception to that general rule is that when there is an ongoing criminal case and the person that's being investigated by DCFS also is a criminal defendant, they also have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So they don't have to say anything that might incriminate them in an ongoing criminal case. And so in those instances, I usually suggest that the parent cooperate to the extent that they can, but try not to say anything about what the accusations are.
Janine, I wanted to say, in respect to not having to allow the investigator into their home, if the allegation is related to the conditions of the home in terms of neglect, that maybe there's no food or, that kind of stuff, maybe no furniture, nothing for the bed. If it's an infant or if it's 5 children and it's 1 mattress, or there's no beds, whatever. So if it's an allegation that's related to something inside that home, specifically neglect, they would have to allow the investigator into their home.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Okay, moving on, throughout the investigation, there are a lot of requirements for the DCFS investigator of what they're required to do. And these are all contained in DCFS Rule 300 that are found on the DCFS website that Sandy showed everyone. But I put down the most important thing is right after the hotline call, the investigator has to interview or check on the child within 24 hours to determine if they're safe. So that if the child is actually in immediate danger, they can take appropriate action. The investigator is also required to establish in-person contact with the parents or caregivers of the child within 24 hours of contacting the child. So usually if the parents in the same home, the investigator will do it at the same time. But say there's another parent that they want to talk to and they're not in the home at the time of the child's interview, they are supposed to speak with that person within 24 hours of the child's interview. And if the person that DCFS is investigating is different from the parents or the current caretakers, they have to reach out to that person within 7 days. The DCFS investigator also has to provide written notice of the allegations, and lawyers call them, and DCFS calls them can't state notice, but what they say is basically a notice of investigation and tells the person who's being investigated exactly what DCFS investigating. So there are all sorts of different codes that DCFS uses to define what kind of abuse and neglect they're investigating. And so this notice will have the appropriate code. Now I get a lot of confusion from clients is these codes, they put them right in front of the allegations. So if the type of allegation is cuts and bruises, that's number 11. And so the parent gets concerned that they're being accused of making 11 cuts and bruises on a child. But that number 11 is actually
Wow.
just the
Yeah.
allegation code.
Right.
So just wanted to clarify that.
Wow. I heard that one. Thank you.
And the investigator also has to interview collateral contacts. So this is anyone who may have information about the child and how they're doing. This can include teachers, doctors, and up to 2 collateral contacts that the parent provides. So if the parent has someone who may be able to speak to their side of the issue, the parent can offer that to the DCFS investigator to also interview. At the end of the investigation, the DCFS investigator is required to make a finding. And the finding is whether abuse or neglect occurred of the child based on all of the information they've gathered in their 60 or 90-day investigation. When a DCFS investigator determines that there isn't enough evidence of abuse or neglect, they'll unfound the case, and the file for the parent or that person being investigated has to be expunged within a set period of time. So no one should have access to parents' unfounded cases, and unfounded cases can't be used against parents in a legal proceeding. Now, when a DCFS investigator actually does find that there's enough evidence of abuse and neglect, they will indicate the parent for abuse or neglect, and they'll indicate them for a particular code. So that's, what I talked about before. If a parent is indicated, the indicated finding stays on what's called a state central register, which is a database of abuse and neglect that's confidential and kept basically in an office in Springfield. And certain employers like teachers, schools and daycare centers have access to this database so that they typically will not hire people who are indicated for abuse or neglect of a child. And the state requires them to check the database before making any hires. So the most neglect indications will stay on a parent's record for 5 years, but more serious ones like abuse or going up to even like homicide of a child, those will stay up for 20 or even 50 years. Okay. If at any time during a DCFS investigation, DCFS determines that a child is in immediate danger, they can create a safety plan with the child's family. And a safety plan usually provides that the child should stay with a friend or family member while the investigation is pending. And this is supposed to be to protect the child. And if DCFS has enough information to believe that the child is in immediate danger, they can actually take protective custody, and I'll talk about that a bit later, and put the child into their care for 48 hours. But in a lot of cases, DCFS actually does a safety plan to avoid having to take the child and then ask a court for permission to continue to keep the child in their care. And a safety plan is defined as a voluntary agreement between a parent and DCFS to keep a child in someone else's care while DCFS is investigating. Now, if a parent doesn't agree to a safety plan, DCFS does explicitly say that they have the right to take the child into protective custody. So often parents do agree to the safety plan because they don't feel like they have another choice. Okay. So I wanted to list some of the really important rights that parents have if they're being investigated. So the first one I kind of already addressed, but that you have the right to be notified of the allegations against you. And you have the right to have that in writing and know which particular code DCFS is investigating. So they don't have to tell you what the hotline caller said, but they have to at least tell you what category of abuse or neglect that they're investigating. You also have the right to be interviewed in person. So a lot of communication gets lost over the phone, and you should ask for an in-person interview if that's what you prefer. This next one we kind of already talked about. If the allegations aren't related to the conditions of the home, you are not required to allow DCFS inside your home. You are also not required to submit to drug testing unless a court orders it. That's like a right to privacy issue. A lot of parents do agree to do it to show that they are clean. And I would recommend doing that to cooperate. But you actually have a right not to take a drug test. The only person who can order you to do that is a judge. And also you can be represented by an attorney during a DCFS investigation. So Cabrini Green Legal Aid takes DCFS investigation cases, and also an organization called Ascend Justice. Like I said, if there's an ongoing criminal case, you have the right to remain silent and not say anything that might incriminate you in the criminal case. And if you're indicated by DCFS, you have the right to appeal the decision of the investigator within 60 days. And if you as a parent are indicated by DCFS, you'll get a notice that you were indicated, and that notice will have everything written out about the process for the appeal. So I'm not gonna run through the whole appeal process, but I definitely recommend that all parents should appeal their cases unless there is a criminal case or a juvenile court case, because if a criminal court has found the parent guilty of the same thing that DCFS is investigating, the parent actually doesn't have an opportunity to appeal. And same thing if DCFS takes the child and puts them in foster care and there's a juvenile court case, and the juvenile court finds that a parent has abused or neglected their child, they also can appeal. But in all other instances, I definitely recommend it. It's the first chance for the parent to get a administrative law judge to review the case. And so it's someone besides DCFS themselves who can really take a bird's eye view over what has done and identify any issues with the investigation. And there was a appeals case about 10 years ago where they found that about 75% of cases are overturned at appeal. So definitely recommend that appeal. And again, you can be represented by an attorney or you can represent yourself in the appeal. And if you appeal successfully, your case gets taken off the state central register. So like I said, instead of having that on your record for 5 to 50 years, the case will be completely expunged. Okay. I did want to highlight this Family Defense Center website. They have a lot of resources for parents and also attorneys who are litigating these DCFS cases. And they have a step-by-step guide for going through an investigation, appealing your case, and they will explain everything in much more detail than I've done here. And you can find that at that link here, https://www.familydefensecenter.net/resources/training. Okay. I think I have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to run quickly through foster care. I know that most parents who are working with alternatives don't have their children in foster care, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this section, but it definitely did want everyone to be aware. And I was going to pose this to the group, but maybe I'll just ask Sandy, what is foster care?
Foster care, oh, let me see if I'm unmuted. Oh, I thought I was muted. Foster care is a system of parents, adults, whether they're married or single, that have gone through a training, and it's that have gone through a training to provide support to a child that's in need of care through dependency, neglect, or abuse. And foster parents are required by law to go to a training to become a foster parent. They have to take X number of courses throughout the year to kind of keep their skills honed. There's a large foster parent support group in the state of Illinois and throughout the country. But foster care is a legal system that provides care for children that are in need of that care because of their involvement with the child welfare system. And they get paid a stipend or something to support children when they are in care. They have responsibilities and they have rights, just like Janine talked about birth parents. So they have to be accountable to not harm children. They can be investigated if a harm or neglect situation occurs while a child is in their care.
And foster care can be temporary or it can be permanent. So when a child has been in foster care for a long time, often the state will try to adopt out that child. And often it's the foster parents who have been with the child for a long period of time who will want to adopt the child. But in some cases, foster parents only are with the child for a few months while the parents are trying to complete their service plan with DCFS and make the conditions in the home better.
Also, relatives can serve as foster parents. Relative foster care is a huge piece where if a child is in need of immediate danger, that investigator should really seek out, is there a non-custodial parent available, and or are there family members that are available to take care of that child while the child is in need of care?
Yeah, and it'd be good to mention as well that a relative can foster a child if one of their relatives, DCFS has taken their child, but unless they go through the licensing process, they'll be paid at a lower stipend rate. So if a relative is looking at potentially fostering a child for a long period of time, I would definitely recommend they try to go through that licensing process so that they can get that higher level of foster care payments to better support the child that they're caring for.
Yeah, Jenny, there's one other category that I didn't mention that I'd like to mention here. It's called fictive kin. And that fictive kin could be a family friend, a friend of the family. It could be the child's coach. It could be the librarian. It could be the person that may be the child's barber, for a young man. Because those are people that the department believes that if a family says that's of somebody they have an emotional support with. So just say there's a mom who has a need for her child to go into care for whatever. Just say the mom is in the hospital. She forgot to, she got sick, went to emergency room, ended up in the hospital for a couple of days and didn't have time to plan for child care. And she might say, well, my daughter's coach or, my son's coach. And so the parent can identify somebody that they trust and has an emotional connection with their child, or it could be the child that identifies somebody that they would feel safe with, that maybe the parents don't even know about or haven't met, like their coach. So that's categories called fictive kin, and that helps the parent to be involved in the parenting process still, in terms of identifying who they believe could best take care of their child while the child is in need of care.
DCFS is actually obligated to try to place a child when they get taken into foster care, try to place them first with a relative or fictive kin, because there's been a lot of research that shows that when children are taken out of their homes, it is a traumatic experience. So if they can be placed with a relative or someone that they know that's fictive kin, it will definitely reduce the trauma that they experience being removed from the home. Now, like I mentioned before, DCFS has the power that to take a child into protective custody, and this shocks a lot of parents, but they actually have the right to take a child into custody for 48 hours without needing permission from the court. So this is based on DCFS's own assessment of the well-being of the child, and if that child is in immediate danger, then they can take this action. After 48 hours, they have to ask what's called the juvenile court, the Child Protection Division, for permission to keep the child in temporary custody while the juvenile court decides whether the parents committed abuse or neglect. Now, juvenile court is the same one that does delinquency cases for children, so criminal cases for children, but it's a different division. It's called the Child Protection Division. And when DCFS goes to the juvenile court to ask for permission to take temporary custody, that's called a shelter care hearing. Now, if you're a parent who's ever experienced this, know that you have the right to be notified of your court date by the investigator who decided to remove the child. And if that hearing doesn't happen within 48 hours, you're entitled to have your child returned to you. The 48 hours does not include weekends and holidays. So if DCFS removed your child on a Thursday, they would have until Monday at the same time to get a court date. And while a child is in temporary custody of DCFS, the parent's rights are limited. So DCFS really does become the custodian of this child, and they can make the decisions for the child's well-being. It's very similar to like when a family court says that one parent can decide things and this other parent has limited decision-making power. So it's a similar case, except that DCFS is the custodian of the child when they have the child in temporary custody. Okay, so parents do still have a lot of rights when their child is in foster care. Like I said, DCFS has to prioritize placing the child with a family member or fictive kin, and they may consider the child's cultural, ethnic, or racial background when choosing a foster family, but they are not required to unless the child is Native American or American Indian, because there's a specific law called ICWA that says that American Indian children must try to place children of that tribal background with a member of a registered Indian tribe. And if your child is taken into foster care, you have the right to visitation within 14 days, and then after that, you get reasonable day visitation. That is usually once per week, but depending on the age and needs of the child, it may be more, or it may be less in some cases if there's a reason to limit visitation. So if the mother is, for example, breastfeeding, they might have more privilege to see their child, to breastfeed their child. DCFS also has to make a goal to return your child to you, barring extreme circumstances. And you have the right to child and family team meetings with DCFS to discuss your case and a plan for your child. And if the goal is for your child to return home, you have the right to a service plan from DCFS, and that service plan is supposed to be in writing. And the service plan details what services DCFS plans to provide to you to try to make the situation better at home for your child. So that may include getting you a bed for the child, or for parents who have past history of drug or alcohol addiction, they may want the parent to participate in treatment. The service plan will also include a visitation plan, which puts down in writing how often a parent gets to see their child. And if you don't agree to the service plan, you have the right to appeal. So you can appeal directly to DCFS, the Administrative Hearings Unit in Springfield, or like Sandy said, you can contact the Office of Inspector General if you really strongly believe that DCFS hasn't been doing their job and want to report that to another office. Even if you don't appeal, DCFS has to arrange an administrative case review every 6 months to determine how you're doing on your service plan, whether you've been provided the services that DCFS is required to provide, and basically assess how your case is going. And finally, you have the right to an attorney. Now, if your child is in foster care, you are automatically appointed an attorney from the public defender's office if you cannot afford one. You can also search for your own private attorney or seek help from legal aid. So Cabrini Green Legal Aid does currently take these cases, as well as Legal Aid Chicago in downtown.
Yeah, I want to add too that the service plan also, in addition to including the services that the department is going to provide for you, it's important to just differentiate the expectations, you know, that they have of parents. What is the parent supposed to do? So you've got the piece that you just spoke about already in terms of the department is going to provide childcare. They're going to buy a bed for, you know, a child, etc. But it also includes, you know, what do they expect you to do? Go to counseling twice a month, or, you know, make sure that, you know, you fix a meal or you have appropriate food at home, et cetera, et cetera. But it's important to know that there's two sides to that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So to summarize, you know, the DCFS has certain mandates that they're required to do to protect children, and they get certain tools from the state in order to carry out these mandates. One of the tools is an investigation, and so they will investigate families where there's some evidence of abuse or neglect, and if they find that there is abuse or neglect, they have the right to take appropriate action. So they can take the child out of the home and put them in foster care. They can also decide to that child is better if they stay with the family. And even if they've indicated a family for abuse or neglect, they may provide intact services. But in all these processes, a parent does have rights, and I've listed some of them out here. There's extensive policies and procedures that govern DCFS. So if you're interested, you can go on the website that Sandy showed you all, and DCFS Rule 300 is the one that contains all the procedures about investigations, and Rule 301 is all the rules about foster care and visitation for when your children are in foster care. And then Rule 315 are rights related to appealing a DCFS investigation. So I would definitely highly suggest, if you want information, to check out those rules. And I hope that at least what we provided has been helpful. I wanted to spend a little bit of time at the very end talking about changes to the court systems due to the coronavirus, since I know that's what everyone's talking about these days. So as we all know, there's a shelter-in-place order, and that means that we all have to stay inside our homes unless we have to go do something essential. And so the things that the governor and the mayor have allowed us to do are to go out to get groceries and food, get pickup at restaurants. And we can also go out to get our medication, so all the pharmacies are still open. We can do individual exercise, and we can still drive. But pretty much everything else is prohibited. I haven't seen a lot of evidence of them actually giving people citations, but it is really prudent because the nation's top health experts are saying that this is the best way that we can prevent coronavirus from spreading. It's become a really, really serious issue in other countries where people haven't been following a shelter-in-place order. So these are the steps that really all of the government officials all over the country have been taking in order to protect all of us. So the things that we aren't allowed to do right now is that all of the schools are closed. I know that's really relevant for parents whose kids may be at home. Some schools have shifted to online learning, but not all of them have. And so unfortunately, you know, the kids don't have to go to school, but there are a lot of resources that nonprofits are trying to do. So if a child has depended on school for their meals, some schools are still trying to get food to those kids, and food pantries are trying to stock up more because they know that there's more need now that a lot of the public facilities are closed. And I know it's tempting to like go visit your neighbor or your friend, but that's been strongly discouraged even if you're only visiting one person. And all the bars and restaurants are closed, so they're only doing pickup or delivery. Finally, I got news a couple of days ago that Lakeshore Drive is closed, so we can no longer go there to walk our dogs or go to the park. And Mayor Lightfoot did say that she would be issuing citations for people who are found on Lakeshore Park premises. So these are the things that aren't currently allowed. Unfortunately.
Go to the mall.
Well, most of the malls are closed, Sandy.
I know. I was just saying we can't go to the mall to shop.
No. Certain things are open, like I know Joann's and like Best Buy, you can pick up things. But yeah, they definitely try to avoid going outside. Say again?
Look, Walmart is open to get your prescription. Yep. They sell food and they have a pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a little shopping at Walmart if you need to. But yeah, we all do want to be safe. I'm just joking about the mall because this is serious. It's very serious.
It is very serious. Yeah, obviously I've never seen anything like this, but I'm much younger, so. But there are a lot of new programs to help families. So if you've lost your job due to the coronavirus, you can apply for unemployment insurance. And here's the link to do that. You can call 1-800-244-5631 or visit www.illinois.gov/IDES. And utility companies aren't allowed to shut off any energy, telecom, or water, and all evictions are currently being suspended.
Very good news.
Yeah, definitely. And then we all might know, but I think Trump just signed a bill that will allow all U.S. citizens and residents to get like a $1,200 stipend in the mail, with more depending on how many children they have. So that's supposed to help folks get through this period. And definitely ask around if there's something that you need. And I know Alternatives is going to survey folks in the community to see if there's any resources that you all may need given the present health situation. I did want to say that courts, for the most part, are closed. So if you had a hearing within the next month before April 16th, your hearing is most likely canceled and will have to be postponed. So if you have a lawyer, check in with your lawyer about that new day, or if not, you can try to call the clerk directly. They are still working remotely, so you should get a call back within a couple of days. The only court cases that are going forward are criminal jury trials, because those are required under the Constitution to go forward. And the juvenile court is still taking temporary custody cases. And so if a child is in danger, then they will step in and address that case. And for certain emergencies, courts will be open, but otherwise you can assume that nothing is going to happen in any of your court cases until the scheduled open date of April 16th. And then for parents whose children are in foster care, DCFS has suspended in-person visitation, and they are strongly encouraged to try to do video visitation with the kids. So if your child is in foster care, you should definitely reach out to your caseworker and try to arrange this video visitation. The director of DCFS, Mark Smith, said that it's a requirement for caseworkers to strongly encourage video visitation. Okay, so let's some room for questions. And also just want to thank everyone for listening in, and thank you to Alternatives for allowing us the space to talk to you all about DCFS. And here is our contact information. Oh, and it looks like our website is missing, but our website is cgla.net.
Thank you, Janine.
Well,
Thank you for the
Sandy.
presentation. It was wonderful. A lot of information that I've learned. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Guys, I guess before we got off, I just wanted to ask, what are some of the things that you all are doing to survive in this new sequestered environment? I know we're doing more video and audio stuff in terms of even this workshop presentation. But Davin, what is one thing that kind of helps get you through this time for you?
Now that I have so much time, because I'm working from home as well and doing a lot of video, I think I use this platform to actually talk to my family now more. So I'm more with my mom and my sisters. They all live in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to Zoom and we have conference calls all the time. So I guess we talking to my family more and just seeing what their needs are, how I can support them, and vice versa. So I guess that's something I can do more. And also just doing, like, as far as work, is doing needs assessments as well. Because we find out a lot of things that we can do now to help out with this cost. So continue to do needs assessments. The families that we currently have right now, we can support our families through the crisis program. So that's good. So just being more helpful, supportive, and finding resources for employees as well as clients.
Thank you. That was good because it certainly helped all of us. I was thinking about, we was talking about earlier, what are some of the family needs? And sometimes families just need ways to be more creative. Exactly. You hear a lot of people saying, I'm bored in the house. but staying connected to our families, whether they're across the street or down the road or in Michigan or some other state or around the world. We can stay connected to our families in a different kind of way, than we were before, because we can't be there to touch them and hug them and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I'm trying to be more intentional about exercising. The only thing I like to do is walking. And so just making sure that I'm more intentional about getting out every day. And if it's just walking about 4 or 5 blocks and coming back, I do that. Because I enjoy eating, and I'll eat a lot of healthy stuff. But by 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm ready for some junk food. And Janine knows I like popcorn.
And candy.
And candy, that's right. Tell the truth, Sandy. I am such a junk food person, but I have been doing so good with the fruit salad and the veggies. And I'm telling you, about 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm like, okay, I need some chocolate, or I need some popcorn. So again, I'm just trying to be more intentional about walking. I know some people are exercising in their homes and, playing with their babies in a different way, running them around, get that energy out to get some exercise. So that's what works for me.
Awesome. Well, should I keep recording?
You can just go to the community slide.
Yes.
And then we can.
Oh, hold on. I have to switch presentation. Can you see the alternatives presentation here?
Yep.
Yes. Well, I see justice as a voice.
Oh. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, just the parent. One more, the 12th slide.
Okay.
We can just do this slide.
All right.
And Sandy made a good point based on the knowledge that we have and like the families we've been talking to, people around the community we've been talking to, we could just have a discussion amongst us and just to see like what are some needs that you've seen or people have said they need this or support, resources. We can just have an open discussion and just talk about what we've been seeing or hearing during this time period.
Oh, Sandy, you're on mute.
Hold on, Sandy, you're on mute.
I was just saying that I hope some of the resources that have been identified in this training that people will find useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know a lot of families that we've been working with don't have vehicles. So getting to like the grocery stores and having money to even go now because they are unemployed. So what Alternative Inc. is we can start doing is paying for Ubers to go to food banks.
Oh yeah.
So I think that would be beneficial for some of the families just to get that transport to get food, even though they're not working right now and they don't have transportation right now. And some families don't even trust the transportation because there's so many people on the bus and trains, so they kind of avoiding that as well. So
yeah, I would think too that maybe giving information about some of the local food pantries might help.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what you just spoke about, Davin, not having transportation and then not even having money to go shopping.
Yep. So I definitely, when I send this out, I can definitely put the resources of the food banks as well that I know about. And there's a few in the south side of Chicago, which is good.
Yeah, you got some churches in there that are also, have food, local food pantries that family members can take advantage of.
Anything else you guys been hearing or seeing?
I primarily work with parents in the jails and prisons, so a lot of the organizing I've been involved in is with getting mothers out of Cook County Jail. So they actually have a program where mothers can stay with their newborn babies for a short period of time to breastfeed. So there's a campaign trying to get all the mothers out because the babies especially are really prone to the coronavirus. And especially anyone who's elderly, they're the ones who are most at risk. So there have been a few phone banks trying to ask the sheriff as well as Governor Pritzker to let elderly and people with pre-existing health conditions out of Cook County Jail, so they're not potentially like putting their lives in danger, especially when these folks are awaiting pretrial, so awaiting trial, so they haven't actually been found guilty of anything, and it would be potentially safer for them to be at home instead of at Cook County Jail. In terms of like parents who are outside, I would say that because kids are home, there may be an extra need for maybe childcare so that they're just not on duty all day, and if that's possible at all. But also like resources for parents whose kids aren't in school and maybe they want to, have some activities to do with them, especially ones that are educational.
Yeah, I would encourage parents to take more advantage of some of the online resources that are out there. CPS website has a lot of educational resources that parents can tap into. They're specific in terms of different subject matters, as well as activities to kind of engage children about learning and just about life and having fun. So there's a lot of educational stuff out there in addition to the CPS website that I would encourage all parents to take advantage of. And I would encourage, because it is hard being at home with your children 24/7 when you're not used to that. It's hard for the children as well as the parents. Some of the parents are beginning to feel inadequate in terms of the subject matter that they're trying to help their children with and frustrated because they can't. So again, I would encourage them, and most parents have a cell phone. I would encourage them to use their cell phone to tap into some of those online resources for fun and games. I would encourage them to try to develop a sense of normalcy as much as possible, where the children and the families have a sense of routine. Maybe from 9 to 11, we're going to do study. We're going to be real focused in terms of learning new things. They can take a walk outside and explore their environment to get some exercise and let the kids run. So I would just say be intentional about trying to normalize this new normal as much as possible, have a routine, and also incorporate some fun in there, some family fun, and make some of those activities more fun than they generally are for the child and for the parent. And invite the kids, the older kids, for what Janine was talking about in terms of needing a break from childcare. Invite the older children to be more responsible and create some competitiveness with that, in terms of making it fun.
I agree with that.
Yeah, we're in survival mode now. You know what I mean? We got to be creative because parents need some creative things for themselves, as keep themselves engaged. And so if the parents are not engaged, they're not going to be able to help the kids stay engaged. So they have to constantly reinvent themselves. And this is really survival mode. We got to pull out all the stops.
Do you think technology is another resource that families might need, like laptops, tablets, just to
they absolutely may. If some people need that support, they absolutely may. Like I said, I believe most parents have a cell phone, but some parents may need some support with that. In terms of, we heard that the major utilities are not going to shut off, but do we know if the cell phone services are going to honor that as well?
Exactly, yeah.
So many families need to be able to stay connected, and that's the only way they're connecting now is through their use of their cell phone. So yes, if there's technology available to support families, if you guys have some of that, I think that would be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I would encourage parents to actually tap into whatever spiritual resources they have, you know, and really, you know, use that and call on whatever higher power, God, Jesus, you know, whoever, whatever they believe in to help them get through. A lot of all the churches are closed now, but there are virtual worship services happening at many churches.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot. I mean, none of us really prepared for this, and it's just something that none of us never experienced as well. So this is new for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We all have, like you said, try to normalize as much as we can and come up with a routine just to see how we can help and support and move
I
through
would
this.
say laugh, you know, laugh. Humor and laughter is so important to get us through the day. We need that. And also, I would say, I lost my train of thought. It was something about having fun. Oh, we all have a junk drawer at home. Janine, do you have a junk drawer?
I have a junk closet.
So we all have at least a junk drawer, a junk room, a junk table, whatever. And this is a good time to really be intentional, not only about laughter and having a schedule, but finishing some of those unfinished projects that we've been procrastinating about. Going into the office takes 2.5 to maybe 3 hours a day for most people. Some people it's just an hour, 30 minutes one way, 30 minutes the other way. But whatever that time is, we now have that because we're at home. For the people that have opportunity to work from home, you don't have that additional travel time. And so that gives at least an hour to 3 or 4 hours a day to finish some of those unfinished projects, clean that junk closet, drawer, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we can do. Or it can be finishing an unfinished project or something you really wanted to do, learn a new language, take a class online, finish that project, that stool or that desk you've been painting for 2 years. Read a book, binge watch your favorite movies. So yeah. And for people that's really stressed out, they've got support services like Alternatives. Do you all provide the counseling for the parents as well?
Yeah, we do family. We do participate in family therapy. So
okay.
There'll definitely be family. It won't just be the parent by himself, but we can also still will find a way to support the family as much as possible individually.
Sure. And you guys may even have some resources where families can get that support, where the parents get it on their own.
Exactly.
So it's just a lot that we can do during this time to keep our sanity. But for some people, this is just really, really overwhelming. And we have to really be intentional about asking those questions and inviting people to take advantage of the resources and support that we are aware of.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No, this has been great.
Well, thank you everybody for participating and speaking about their expertise, and I feel like I'm a YouTube it, and hopefully a lot of families can watch it.
I hope so. And Devin, as you do that, can you create a way for people to submit questions or comments?
Mm-hmm.
And that, at some point you guys can go in and look at those and respond as needed?
Yep. So I'm definitely going to submit these with the needs assessment. And
great.
Also just for questions they can have, and if they want to respond to that, they can, of course, they have my email throughout the PowerPoint presentation. They can email
Great.
me. So.
Great.